Since when did doing the right thing become a problem? Shedeur Sanders, rookie quarterback, fifth-round pick, son of a legend, skipped the glitz of the ESPYs. No red carpet, no flashing lights, no viral sound bites. Just one mission: to help families in Cleveland after a deadly explosion tore through their neighborhood. He didn't show up in a suit. He didn't bring a film crew. He didn't post a carefully scripted message with brand logos in the corner. He just showed up with food, with shirts, with compassion. But instead of applause, he got backlash. A local media insider accused him of skipping out, of making a statement, of somehow doing something wrong by helping people instead of chasing a trophy. Let that sink in. In a world where athletes are celebrated for empty speeches and flashy suits, Shedeur Sanders chose purpose over publicity and triggered a media meltdown in the process. And whether they'll admit it or not, it wasn't because he skipped the show. It was because he refused to play their game. On paper, it sounds like a non-story. A rookie quarterback skips a sports award show to serve his community. End of discussion, right? Not in Cleveland. Not when the name is Shedeur Sanders. Suddenly, what should have been a heartwarming headline became tabloid fuel. Kay Cabot, one of Cleveland's most vocal media figures, lit the match. With veiled criticism and raised eyebrows, she questioned Shedeur's absence from the ESPYs like he ditched a Supreme Court hearing. You'd think he turned his back on football itself. But here's what actually happened. Shedeur Sanders chose to skip the spotlight, to skip their spotlight and give it to someone else, to families who lost their homes, to kids who'd lost everything, to a city still reeling from a fire that tore through lives without warning. And for that, he became the villain? Somehow the narrative flipped. Why wasn't he there? Is he really committed? What message is he sending? The kind of noise you expect when a star gets caught in scandal, not when he shows up with food trucks and community spirit. They twisted integrity into arrogance. They turned a charity appearance into a controversy. Not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. He didn't show up for their cameras. He didn't chase their clout. He didn't play along. And that's all it took. This wasn't about missing an award show. This was about a system that couldn't control the narrative. A system that panics when someone writes their own story. It was a normal summer evening in Cleveland, until it wasn't. In an instant, an explosion tore through a quiet neighborhood, leaving behind charred homes, scattered debris, and a stunned community trying to make sense of what had just happened. Lives were flipped upside down. Families lost everything. And the city, still healing from its own struggles, was thrown into another crisis. But before the headlines could even settle, Shedeur Sanders showed up. No press release, no Instagram countdown, just action. While most rookies were soaking up the ESPY spotlight, Shedeur rolled into Cleveland with food, water, clothes, and a calm presence that cut through the chaos. He brought support, but more importantly, he brought humanity. Not just as a football player, but as someone who saw real people suffering and moved fast to help. He walked the streets, talked with survivors, handed out essentials with his own hands. There was no PR team in sight. No cameras following him around. The stories didn't come from a branded campaign. They came from the people he helped. A mother who lost her home said he didn't even talk about football. He just wanted to make sure we were okay. This wasn't a stunt. It wasn't about looking good. It was about doing good. And in a league where image is everything, that's exactly why it scared people. Because when someone like Shedeur starts making an impact off the field, people in power start asking questions they don't want answered. They didn't have to say it out loud. They never do. But if you listened closely, the message was clear. Shedeur Sanders doesn't know his place. It wasn't the first time the media painted a confident black quarterback as arrogant, and it won't be the last. But this time, the target was Shedeur, and they came at him sideways. Not with facts, but with implication. not with open criticism, but with condescending concern. Kay Cabot didn't outright attack him. She just questioned him, wondered aloud if his absence at the ESPYs meant something, asked if his actions were setting the right tone. Subtle, right? But this is how the playbook works. The moment a young, outspoken athlete steps out of line, especially one with power, influence, and the Sanders name, the media starts the smear. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet enough to sneak past the casual fan. But it's there. Is he focused on football? Why wasn't he at the awards? Is he too caught up in the spotlight? Never mind the fact that Shedeur wasn't chasing fame. He was literally delivering aid to families in need. But that didn't fit the narrative. Because if Shedeur had shown up at the ESPYs in a designer suit, flashed a few cameras, given a boring quote, they would have loved it. He would have been mature, poised, media-ready. But he showed up in Cleveland for real people, and that made him unpredictable. That made him dangerous, not to fans, but to the image machine that needs players like Shedeur to fit a mold. The Cleveland Browns have had quarterbacks. Lots of them. From draft bust to flash-in-the-pan hype trains, it's been a rotating door of broken promises and bad fits. But Shedeur Sanders? He's something else entirely. And that's exactly why people don't know how to handle him. He doesn't just want to be a great quarterback. He wants to own the game, lead his way, speak his truth, control his brand, his image, his future. That kind of mindset terrifies the old guard of the NFL because they can't script it. Shedeur grew up in the spotlight, but not as a passenger. He was raised by Deion Sanders, a man who didn't just play the game, he rewrote it. Primetime made sure Shedeur understood one thing. If you let them shape your story, they'll twist it every time. So Shedeur took control from day one. He didn't go through an agent. He built a team. He didn't let reporters define his image. He built a brand. He didn't beg for NFL approval. He demanded respect on his terms. And it's working. Even on the field, he plays differently. Poised, calm, calculated. No forced drama, no ego-driven outbursts. Just precision and leadership that feels more CEO than QB. He's not trying to prove he belongs. He knows he does. And that quiet confidence drives critics crazy. Because this isn't a maybe talent. This is a potential franchise cornerstone who happens to know his worth and say it out loud. The NFL is full of unwritten rules, and one of the biggest is this: rookies don't lead. They're supposed to be quiet, earn their stripes, wait their turn. But Shedeur Sanders, he skipped that script from day one. Before he even took a snap, teammates noticed something different. He wasn't loud, he wasn't cocky, but he owned the room, walked into team meetings like a veteran, spoke with clarity, asked the hard questions, and more than anything, he listened. Veterans talk, coaches talk, but leaders, they listen first, then move. One Browns staffer reportedly said, "You'd think he's been in the league for 5 years the way guys respond to him." Another anonymous player said, "It's weird. When Shedeur talks, even the vets stop talking." And that's where the whispers started. Some wondered if Deshaun Watson was feeling the heat. After all, he's the one with the massive contract and the weight of the franchise on his shoulders. But suddenly, cameras are shifting. Reporters are asking about Shedeur, and fans, they're chanting his name at camp. That kind of shift doesn't happen unless something real is brewing behind the scenes. But here's the thing, Shedeur hasn't tried to steal the spotlight. He just shows up, works harder than anyone else, and treats teammates like equals. He leads with action, not hype. And players are noticing. The Browns haven't had a culture like this in years. One where the young guy sets the tone, and the veterans follow. When the first wave of criticism didn't stick, some outlets doubled down. One headline called him immature. Another claimed he was more influencer than athlete. But the loudest voice came from a Cleveland columnist who all but said what others were only hinting at. maybe Shedeur Sanders isn't ready for the NFL spotlight. The piece dissected everything: his fashion, his jewelry, his absence at the ESPYs, his name. It wasn't analysis. It was character assassination dressed as commentary. They called it concern, but anyone paying attention could see the tone. It wasn't about football. It was about control. About reminding a young, confident black quarterback that the league still had its gatekeepers. But Shedeur? He didn't clap back, didn't fire off a tweet, didn't go on a podcast rant. He just posted a single photo, him in Cleveland, surrounded by the kids he helped. No caption, no hashtags, just facts. And the internet took care of the rest. The comments exploded. This is who you're hating on? He's out here doing more for the city than half the roster. Media needs to shut up and let him work. The hit piece didn't expose Shedeur. It exposed the bias. It exposed the desperation of a narrative slipping out of their control. Because when fans saw who he really was and what he was actually doing off the field, the media's words lost all power. In today's NFL, most players fight fire with fire. If the media attacks, they hit back harder. Tweets fly, podcasts pop off, PR teams scramble. But Shedeur Sanders? He went quiet. Not because he was scared, not because he didn't have a response, but because he knew something most rookies don't. Silence is power. While critics tossed out hot takes and desperate jabs, Shedeur just kept doing the work. Training camp, charity events, late film sessions, no quotes, no drama, no distractions. And that silence? It started to feel loud. Because fans weren't used to that. They were expecting a reaction, a slip-up, a headline. Instead, they got a 22-year-old who acted like a seasoned vet, letting his actions do the talking. Even behind the scenes, coaches took note. One Browns assistant reportedly said, "He doesn't waste a word. Everything with him is intentional. You can feel it." And that's what separates Shedeur from the hype. He doesn't just want attention. He wants legacy. He doesn't need to trend. He needs to win. By saying nothing, he said everything. He told the league, "You don't get to define me." He told the critics, "You're not worth my breath." And he told his teammates, "I'm here to lead, not to entertain." It's not flashy, it's not viral, but it's real, and that's what resonates. For weeks, Shedeur Sanders kept his head down and his mouth shut. But just when the conversation was cooling off, Colin Cowherd walked into the room and poured gasoline on the fire. On his national show, Cowherd didn't just compliment Shedeur's maturity or work ethic. He flat out said it. "I'd take Shedeur over half the starting QBs in the league right now. He might be better than Deshaun." In one sentence, he turned speculation into a full-blown QB controversy. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. What fans were whispering in comment sections, Cowherd was shouting on national TV. What reporters were dancing around, he made loud and clear. It wasn't just about Shedeur making the team. It was about Shedeur taking the job. Cleveland exploded. Sports radio lit up. Social media went feral. Some called Cowherd a genius. Others said he was stirring the pot. But one thing was certain. The Browns no longer had one quarterback story. They had two, and Shedeur's was rising faster. And through it all, Shedeur stayed silent. No quote, no emoji, no retweet. Just another practice, another rep, another step closer. That's what makes him dangerous. Not just the talent, not just the leadership, but the timing. He's saying nothing and letting everyone else say it for him. Because now, it's not just fans watching. It's coaches, it's analysts, it's the league. And whether they love him or hate him, they're all talking about one thing. Is Shedeur Sanders really the future in Cleveland?